r/AskReddit by Reddit. Redditors who were raised in a cult. When was the first time you realized something was wrong? When I was 8, my mom dragged me and my 3 little brothers off from our perfectly normal Methodist church to join an independent fundamental Christian church and enrolled us into the school that the church controlled and ran. Think the Duggar/Bill Gothard type of thing, but just not affiliated with any of that. I was instantly marked as a rebellious child trademark because I had the sheer audacity to ask questions. We were also told that a cult was any religion that doesn't believe Jesus is God. I didn't find out what an actual cult was until I was in college. The independent fundamental Baptist churches in our area were decried as too liberal. The amount of bull in that church is too much to write fully about here. Just for fun, though, Google the sin of Bathsheba and read it for a laugh. That was printed off, put in the foyer on a table, and distributed to us preteen girls in the youth group. I think my first inkling that something was wrong was either around 2002 when my mother forced me to throw out a pair of shorts because they exposed the welts she left on the backs of my thighs, or maybe around 2005 when my mother, along with most parents in the church, went on a purge the devil from my home binge brought on by a bugshed insane street preacher the church hosted every so often, and throughout every single Star Wars action figure, DVD, VHS tape, and book we owned. My Lord of the Rings trilogy was tossed because I liked it better than the Bible. My entire life was so ducked up that I developed trichotillomania at 11, which I was screamed at for having, and came down with the shingles at age 14 from the pure stress of living in my house. The odd cult did eventually sort of dissipate when it turned out the pastor was one, allowing his adult children to do whatever the duck they wanted in the church, including stealing money from the accounts and 2, creeping on us teenage girls and a few married women. It still half exists, I guess, but I haven't been to church in almost a decade and now consider myself solidly agnostic. The only upsides to that mess was that I developed a stunning ability to argue about literally anything using the Bible and have an excellent understanding of other crazy religions like Mormonism and JWs and Scientology, so when people knock on my door at 8 AM to half-ass proselytize they never return. Calling it a cult might be a stretch, but I was raised in an incredibly religious household and went to a pretty intense evangelical church most days of the week. My parents put me in just about every club group the church offered, between youth group, Bible study, church services, young adults group, Awana, etc. I was there pretty often. Anyway, my parents didn't have enough money for a private Christian school, so public school was really my only escape from my super Christian environment. Sophomore year of high school I was taking a government class and we did this exercise to see where people stood on certain issues, where the teacher would say here's a topic, go to the left side if you're for this, and right side if you're against it. Then someone in the group would have to give some reasons why they thought that way. I stood alone on one side of the room on probably 3 out of 4 issues, and when I had to defend my choice, there were just too many times when my only reasoning was because God/my parents say so. That gave me some pause to think about if I really believed those things at all. It didn't instantly shatter my faith, but it was definitely the moment my opinions started to change and I began to analyze what I was being told. I realized I didn't actually care about most of the things I was standing for. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and the first time I realized things were weird and wrong was when I wasn't allowed to play school sports because it would be too much interaction with the evil worldly kids who would be a bad influence. I wasn't allowed to have any non-JW friends, and it was just awful. Going to public school and making friends, but never seeing them outside of school was torture. I really wish I got to play sports too. I remember I had a classmate growing up. He was popular, but still somewhat out of place. I remember every time there was a holiday, and when our 6th grade English teacher started reading us Harry Potter, his parents would pick him up from school and would always make it a point to come to the classroom and let us know that they don't celebrate anything. It wasn't until I was a little bit older that I learned that he was a JW. We all felt so bad that he wasn't allowed to celebrate even his birthday, but his parents told the class every year that we weren't allowed to give him anything. Raised JW. I'm not going to split hairs over whether it's a cult or not, but it definitely has cultish element and could be considered a high control group, which you could argue is just a PC term for cult. For context, they teach that the last days began in 1914 and that Armageddon would come before that 1914 generation died out. The problem here is obvious. Everyone alive in 1914 is dead. Maybe there are a few stragglers, but definitely not a generation. The answer to this problem, in their eyes, was to revise the term Generation 2, in this context, include two overlapping groups. Now not only were the people alive in 1914 part of that generation, but so are the people who were alive when that first group was alive. Essentially, you could be born in 1990, and by their new definition, be a part of the 1914 generation. When they introduced that teaching, I didn't believe it. It's plainly ridiculous. Slowly I began to re-examine other things I was taught as a child, and eventually I realized how monstrous much of what they teach is, such as disfellowshipping and prohibiting blood transfusions. I grew up in a small church. We were all homeschooled and all aspects of our life had to be approved by the pastor. Anyways, one day at a potluck, mandatory parties we must all attend at every holiday, keeping everyone from their families, a kid pretended to smoke a cigarette. I think he used a stick or gum. Something silly like that. Pastor decided as a punishment this kid had to smoke an entire pack of cigarettes. I think he was 10 or 11. He had to do this in front of the entire church. We watched him turn green and puke over and over, but he was forced to continue. This was the first time I realized how wrong this all was, but certainly not the last. I have endless stories in the same vein. It took me a long time to realize how psychology damaging my childhood was and how much the adults around me failed me. I'm now 26 and finally fully cutting myself off from the people that enabled this abuse for years. I struggle all the time with my parents as well. My mom acts like, because she protected us from more stuff than the other parents, that she is somehow absolved from guilt. I know they were just doing the best they knew how though. It's no use being bitter over the past. It would just be nice for them to take some responsibility. I wasn't raised in textbook cult, but my parents had some serious issues and decided that they would live and raise their kids an hour outside of any civilization in the wilderness with no phones, and didn't give us any form of education at all, and we were all preparing for the apocalypse and the return of Jesus any day now. My only view into the world for many years was through a tiny black and white television that I had to carefully tune and put foil on the antenna to get any reception and watch PBS, which is how I learned to read and other basics of life via Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and other shows. Thank God for PBS. I was probably just hitting puberty when I realized something was really wrong with what I've always believed and was taught. I was never taught anything about growing older and my body or reproduction, so it was a mystery for a long time, until my grandmother started sending me science books and I finally figured out what was happening. Even still I was racked with guilt that I kept having wrong thoughts about sex and couldn't figure out why God would make people this way and then punish them for it. I also read Cosmos by Carl Sagan and realize that what we understand about the universe is far more fantastic than the Bible describes, and that the Bible can't be the whole story. By the time I was 18 my parents finally relented and we got a telephone, then eventually a computer and internet. My parents had slowly changed from doomsday prepping Bible thumpers to drunk cocaine addicts, so they didn't really care about what we were doing so much anymore. By 21 I got out and started experiencing the world, including dating a girl I met online. We eloped and I moved out, and the rest is a beautiful story of succeeding and thriving in a world of potential and possibilities. Haha, just kidding. My life is a wreck 20 years later, most of my family is dead, and I still can't get ahead, and have diagnosed PTSD, anxiety disorder and depression. That makes it hard to focus on any kind of work and my water just got shut off, and my house is in foreclosure. Edit. Wow. Thank you all for the kindness and good wishes. Sometimes I get jaded about Reddit. There's so much negativity and cynicism here. I always have an anxiety flare up when I share anything about my life here, so it makes my night seeing so many people understanding and supportive. Edit. Oh god, and now my cat is dying. Whoever is playing this simulation put it on hard mode as a joke. Thank you for watching Reddit. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more r/AskReddit videos. Share your stories in the comment section below.